Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz. You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Good afternoon. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Good afternoon. You are listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Coming up on this afternoon's very auspicious show, we're actually going to discuss the War Powers Act, Posse Comitatus, and acts of war. This past week, President Trump initiated the missile strike on the Syrian capital of Damascus, and now many are crying foul in the media and also among the politicos of the nation. All that and more here on the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. It's going to be interesting. Stick around.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
I will build a great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
The American people are frustrated because their elected officials don't listen. When we're home on the campaign trail, we say we listen. And yet something about this Senate floor, something about Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's the water, something in the air, the cherry blossom, but people get here and they stop listening to the American people.
What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten. It's one more example of the United Nations doing more harm than good in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
My duty, and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber, is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Senators, members of Congress, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. President. You had one damn job. Seriously.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, children of all ages, the new Millennial Resistance does indeed begin right here, right now. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins with you. Welcome to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. You can join us now, Facebook Live, facebook.com/HoloNet, tweet at the HoloNet. As always, find us on Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio app as well. We are everywhere, and we are everyone. So make sure that you keep up on everything on the holonet.com and the holonet.lanterns.buzz. Now, what brings us together today, aside from my fabulous laptop setup, is the War Powers Act and the Syrian strikes, which were completed successfully this past week by forces of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Third Republic of France. If you don't know your French history, yes, this is the third time France has tried to pull off a republic, and it always seems to lean a little bit more towards socialism, but that's a subject for another show. A lot of would-be political pundits, a lot of political parties even, are crying foul of President Trump's authority to execute such a strike under the Constitution of the United States, and I will tell you that they are 100% correct. It does not stipulate in the Constitution of the United States that the President has the ability to unilaterally make military action in a foreign nation. That's where the War Powers Act comes in. So the question isn't, were President Trump's actions under the War Powers Act constitutional? The question truly is, that we should be truly asking, is the War Powers Act constitutional? And that's the subject that I want to brush upon today, because I will let you know out front my feelings on the Syrian strikes. Based on the information available to him, I feel President Trump acted appropriately and the only way that an American president, under the auspices of the War Powers Act, can respond. The response was proportional, but I had an excellent Twitter conversation with a good friend of mine. He's another radio show host. He was filling in, I believe it was on Kogo in San Diego, good man Chris Merrill, and he asked for some input during his show just a couple days ago. He was doing some fill-in work over there, and I was happy to oblige him. So I shot him a couple of quick tweets just to let him know my view on the overall situation. I said, the die is cast, and now the world waits for Vladimir Putin to decide Russia's move. Taking this on its surface, President Trump's actions tonight seem justified. However, after the debacle of Iraqi WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, the question remains, do we trust our government and intel apparatus? For me, that is a resounding hell no. Let me run down a list of things I trust more than the United States government, starting with sushi from a New Jersey Turnpike rest stop. I trust more than the United States government. Let's see here. A promise to pay with a Discover card. I trust more than the United States government. Let me see here a couple things. Room temperature ceviche from Tijuana. I trust more than the United States government. The list goes on. But I do not trust our government in the least to act in a competent fashion, which is why I am a small government conservative with some significantly libertarian leanings. I believe that the government should be as small as possible, only as large as necessary, and that you have minimum government, maximum freedom. That is me. That is how I identify myself as a constitutional conservative. I believe that all government actions need to be confined to and in concordance with the Constitution of the United States, in case you haven't listened to the last 55 shows. If you haven't, by the way, I'd love for you to go online and check those out now. Those are on iHeartMedia, also on Spreaker, and also on HoloNet.com, theholonet.com. So, I continued to my buddy Chris saying, SecDef Mattis, or Secretary of Defense, former 4-star Marine Corps General Mattis, stated the intel confidence was sufficient, and it's hard not to trust a man like Mattis. Violation of the Geneva Accords in the crimes against humanity that Syria allegedly committed are serious enough where inaction would be equally unacceptable. And that is the crux, folks. What is worse here? That we take action in a foreign nation which may or may not jive with the American people's interpretation of the War Powers Act and the Constitution of the United States, and that we act to prevent the proliferation and use of chemical and biological weapons, or that we sit back and do nothing. What's worse? Because I've heard it said many times, most notably by Mr. Beck on The Blaze, that God will not hold us blameless. And I believe that. I believe that when we see horrific crimes against humanity, such as the attacks in Syria, that we are compelled to act. And when a man like 4-star General, I don't know if it's completely respectful to use his nom de guerre, but Mad Dog Mattis, tells us that the intel was of sufficient confidence, then this is a little bit different to me than Colin Powell holding up a file at the onset of the Gulf War. But it really comes down to, do you trust them? Do you trust the American government as it exists in the Trump administration today to get it right? Where Colin Powell, President Bush, and the administration of yesteryear got it so very wrong. That is what you need to ask yourself when you ask yourself where you stand on the U.S.'s response to Syria. Now, a lot of people are going to hop on the radio and the talk box and tell you that World War III is upon us, hence my very entertaining little intro for anybody who caught that on Facebook, where I rolled out this little beauty from Red Alert Command and Conquer. Little theme music there, just to set the mood for you. I think actually PewDiePie might have used this too in a video where he was subsequently accused of being a Nazi. And, you know, for maximum effect, how about we just go ahead and we throw in the air raid siren too? Yup. So, that is to indicate to you folks that just as Alex Jones and many of the would-be pundits out there are indicating, World War III and the end of the world is indeed at hand. Enough of that garbage. Let me shut all that crap off. Guys, I'm not a fearmonger. I'm not going to jump out here and tell you that the end is at hand, the end is nigh, it is coming. I'm going to admit that, I put out a Twitter with the National Weather Service of Phoenix, Arizona here, the night of the airstrike, saying, man, there better not be a dust storm in Phoenix tonight where everybody's cell phone goes off with the emergency broadcast message, because I may actually crap myself. The tall talk that Russia was giving, the very inflammatory rhetoric that a preset scenario is now underway. That that's my best, most officious possible voice. Come on, I mean, Russia has been beating their chest over Syria For months, 6 times, as Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley asserted, 6 times have the Russians utilized their permanent UN Security Council member veto power to stop investigative and punitive measures against the regime of Bashar al-Assad. And, of course, Russia is going to come out swinging with, "This will not be without consequence, comrade." Yeah, guys, I got news for you. Here's the consequence. Syria's chemical weapons capacity has been bombed to... It's gone. History. 86th. Chapter 11. Finito. That's the consequence right now. The next step, as I alluded to in my tweet, is what is Russia going to do about it? Do I think the missiles are going to fly and people are going to die? No, because, folks, this isn't 1989. It's not even 1991, when the world arguably came the closest to nuclear war during the coup d'etat against Boris Yeltsin. No, folks, that's not the way the world works anymore. Russia has neither the time, money, nor inclination to launch a full-scale military punitive action against the United States, nor do they have the ability to take out a full-carrier battle group in the Eastern Mediterranean. They get smoked. No. Instead, it's going to be long. It's going to be drawn out, protracted, and ugly. And it's going to be a battle that is fought in the halls of embassies around the world as Cold War diplomacy resumes. All right, you're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into Posse Comitatus and the worst argument against border militarization ever. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be bigly, hugely big. We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on Lanterns Media Network.
I see people coming together not for divisiveness of party or for dichotomy of thought, but for unity in principle. And the principles that founded our nation, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those principles are under the sternest attack that we have seen in many generations. It has become a crime in this nation nearly to express a difference in opinion from what is held by your party to be doctrine, from what is purported by the media to be truth. We have an opportunity to reach out to our fellow Americans regardless of their creed and regardless of their political inclinations, and unite as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats, as liberals or conservatives, but to unite around the principles that have guided this nation so well. I've covered a lot of stories, but the story that remains untold is the story of America in the 21st century, when we choose to turn back the tide against progressive socialism, when we choose to embrace the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, when we remember what it is to be Americans. And that principle will not die as long as there is one man, one woman, one child who looks defiantly into the night and says, I am free.
You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Yes, indeed. We are back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. And now, Posse Comitatus, which, unless you're a political... you may have never actually heard of. Posse Comitatus is a law on the books, and if you want to get specific with this for the lawyers out there, and the Google lawyers too, it is 18 code, U.S. Code 18, Section 1385, use of Army and Air Force as Posse Comitatus, exact verbiage. Whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress, willfully uses any part of the Army or Air Force as Posse Comitatus or otherwise to execute the laws shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. So... it doesn't say impeached. It doesn't say the president cannot use the army to support the borders or to uphold the sovereignty or territorial integrity of the United States, which are by definition foreign policy matters, not domestic legal matters, but foreign policy matters. No, it says that no person may willfully use any part of the Army or Air Force as Posse Comitatus or otherwise execute the laws, or they will be fined or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. So let me give you a hypothetical scenario here, okay? I live in Arizona. Of late, our sheriff was the much venerated and deeply respected Joe Arpaio. I say much venerated, that's by a lot of other people. I have my issues with Sheriff Joe. I agreed with him on many, many things. However, I disagreed with him on, well, messing with a judge, and as a result, bringing in millions of dollars of legal fines getting paid with my tax dollars. So I'm against that. However, the other things that he did, I'm cool. I seriously agreed with his immigration sweeps, picking up people that shouldn't be here, who are here as illegal immigrants in the United States, and getting them to the proper authorities, getting them over to ICE, and getting them deported from the country. I mean, that seems upholding the law. That's what we elect law enforcement people to do. But I digress. So let's say, hypothetical situation here, Sheriff Joe's conducting one of his sweeps. Now, I live very close to a major Air Force installation here in Maricopa County. So, if Sheriff Joe noticed that he was a little lax in the manpower, couldn't quite get as many deputies as he needed to, and he walked up to the Air Force base, and he talked to the commander of the Marine Battalion that's based there, or of the Air Force Security Group that's based there, and he said, "Boys, I need some help. Hop in the car, we're gonna go round up some illegal immigrants." If Sheriff Joe had done this, boom, right there. Where's the mic drop sound? Gotta find it. Right there. That is your violation of Posse Comitatus, in which case Sheriff Joe would be fined or sent to jail for 2 years, because he has willfully, at that point, engaged the United States Air Force in a posse comitatus. He has committed a posse, or formed a posse composed of military officers in order to enact civil law, criminal law. Do you get it? Am I hitting home here? This law was brought about largely because of Arizona. Because what would happen in the Old West? I mean, I don't have the fanfare sound, but you know the sound of a cavalry charge? How the cavalry always arrives late as usual to help the beleaguered U.S. Marshal or the beleaguered town sheriff and win for the good guys? Well, that kind of crap happened all the time in the Old West. It was commonplace for an overrun local official, be they honest and upholding the law or corrupt as hell, to call in the military to back their play. It happened a lot. It went badly sometimes, and some horrific things took place, especially when you look to the past of some company towns that were out there, where they were putting down a strike, or executing miners, or like in Jerome, Arizona, where there was a great big strike at the United Verde mine, and they picked a bunch of them up and dropped them off over the state line in California. Here's your hat, what's your hurry, and just evicted them straight from the state. That kind of crap happened constantly. That is why Posse Comitatus was brought into play. Posse Comitatus was never designed with the intention of barring the commander-in-chief from utilizing the military forces of the United States to protect our territorial integrity and preserve American sovereignty, people! That was never the damn point! You missed it! What that is designed to do is prevent local law enforcement officials from enlisting the military to help them act. That's what it prevents. It makes it so that a military officer cannot stroll up to my house, shackle me, and carry me off, because the American people distrust the heavy foot of the government. Why? Because that's what the British used to do. You'd have a group of redcoats bang on your door in the middle of the night and haul you off. And you were tried before a military tribunal instead of a jury of your peers. This is where another forgotten amendment to the Constitution comes from. One of the Bill of Rights, that no troops shall be quartered in private homes except at times of war. It's because they would go, oh geez, these soldiers need somewhere to sleep. Hey, Holloway, you're out. We're using your house. It's along those same lines, folks. It comes from distrust of the government at all levels, local through federal, and that the force of the military cannot be used to compel enforcement of domestic law. But since when is a border domestic law? A huge swath of foreign affairs is composed of border disputes. They are foreign affairs by nature. It is international law, not domestic law, that is in play here. As such, Posse Comitatus has absolutely no limiting effect on President Trump's ability, or any other president's ability, to deploy military forces to protect the American border. And if you don't believe me, you can check out the Cato Institute, cato.org. This is by Gene Healy. Originally appeared in the Akron Beacon Journal, October 7, 2005. The law the president seems to be referring to is the Posse Comitatus Act, the long-standing federal statute that restricts the government's ability to use the U.S. military as a police force. Senator John Warner, Republican Virginia, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, also signaled his desire to change the law. Pentagon spokesman Lawrence DeRita called Posse Comitatus a very archaic statute that hampers the president's ability to respond to a crisis. Not so. The Posse Comitatus Act is no barrier to federal troops providing logistical support, in this case, during natural disasters. Nor does it prohibit the president from using the army to restore order in extraordinary circumstances, even over the objection of a state governor. So I have to say sorry to the honorable governor of Oregon. If the president wants the National Guard from your state, he's gonna get them. What it does is set a high bar for the use of federal troops in a policing role that reflects America's traditional distrust of using standing armies to enforce order at home, a distrust that is well justified. Okay? So it does not preclude the use of the military for law enforcement operations domestically, it sets a very high bar. The very high bar is that it must be authorized by Congress and consistent with the Constitution, per the Posse Comitatus Act. So if Congress authorizes the President of the United States to deploy our armed forces to enforce our border with Mexico, Posse Comitatus is completely irrelevant. So the next time you have some troll on Facebook, Twitter, insert your social media feed here, hell, even Reddit, if you have somebody who's throwing Posse Comitatus in your face as reasoning that we cannot send troops to the border, that one's dead and stinking. There is no case for Posse Comitatus to bar President Trump from enforcing the southern border of the United States. Take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to launch into the War Powers Act and how that is now being trotted out by the left and even by some people on the right as basically disallowing President Trump from attacking Syria. All that and more here on the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Holloway, and I hope you're enjoying our podcast so far. It's been exciting putting this together for you, and I'm looking forward to many more to come. I did want to let you know that in setting up the HoloNet and getting everything launched here, we've gone ahead and set up a page on patreon.com. Now, if you haven't heard of Patreon, Patreon is a website that's similar to other crowdfunding sources that allows you to support on a month-to-month basis those sources, those artists, and those groups that you really care about and that you're passionate about. And I hope that we can ignite passion in a lot of people to become more involved in the political process, and also to become involved in the conversation and to keep that political dialogue alive. So I'd like to humbly ask you today to consider becoming a patron of the HoloNet on patreon.com, and you can access that at patreon.com/theholonet. We have various levels of patronage. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, which unlocks exclusive content for the Patreon community, such as a feed of patron-only content. Then you have a $5 option, which gives you behind-the-scenes access to blog about the different inspirations that we have. It'll give you access to patrons-only polling. And then we have a $10 option, which gives you a signed digital poster plus everything else. $20 option, which gives you name in the credits on the site, and all other rewards. And we even have a segment sponsor package available on Patreon, which is $125 a month, which entitles you and your business to a 60-second ad as a segment sponsor during the podcast, of course, subject to content approval. So if you would like to become a patron of the HoloNet, we would be greatly thankful to you, and it's going to go toward a solid cause of generating this sort of millennial constitutional conservative content that is so lacking in our media today. So thank you for your time, for your consideration, and for being a part of the HoloNet. Here we hold the line against the night, and the millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
Holy shit, dude.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Oh, yes, indeed, that's right. The new Millennial Conservative Resistance does indeed begin right here, right now with you. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Well, I said we were going to do it, and God help me, we're going to do it. We're going to launch into the constitutionality of President Trump's strike against the Syrian capital of Damascus. I say President Trump's strike, but it's not really just his strike. That strike also belongs to Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and also the President of France. So that would be Prime Minister Theresa May and President... Oh, geez. Emmanuel Macron? I think it's Emmanuel. I gotta check. Not too up on the names of French politicians. Sorry about that, guys. But anyway, this attack belongs to 3 out of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. So that tells you something right away. That the very strong intelligence cited by General Mattis, Secretary of Defense Mattis, was sufficiently strong where the British and also the French elected to join the action, which is no small feat. No small feat at all. Now, as to the constitutionality of this action, per the United States Constitution, the power to declare war and to declare an end to a war resides solely with the United States Congress. However, U.S. Code 50, Section 1542, also known as the War Powers Resolution, has several sections. It's Section 1541 through 1549. But I'm going to go to the purpose and policy here. It is the purpose of this chapter to fulfill the intent of the framers of the Constitution and ensure collective judgment of both Congress and the President will apply to introduction of United States armed forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by circumstances, and to the continued use of such forces in hostilities or in such situations. Under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it is specifically provided that Congress shall have the power to make all laws necessary and proper for the carrying into execution not only of its own powers, but also all other powers vested by the Constitution in the government of the United States or any department of or officer thereof. The constitutional powers of the President as Commander-in-Chief to introduce United States armed forces into hostilities and into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by circumstances are exercised only to pursuant to 1. A declaration of war, 2. Specific statutory authorization, or 3. A national emergency created by an attack on the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. So that is the first chapter of the War Powers Resolution. As you go into the bill itself, it provides many caveats and many requirements of the President of the United States when they choose to introduce military forces into an area. The long and short of it is that the President has a set period of time to notify the United States Congress of such action. That set period of time is 48 hours. 48 hours, think about that. In 48 hours, with the full might of the United States military, you could pick any place on the planet where there are enemies of the United States, forces that mean to do us harm, and essentially nuke them till they glow and shoot them in the dark. 48 hours in today's fast-paced war is a long time. The entire attack that took place on Damascus took place over the course of some 4 hours. It was fast. The initial attack on Iraq under the Bush administration took place over a weekend. I remember watching it on the news. It was over and done with. So within 48 hours, the President has the ability to introduce military forces, and at 48 hours must report to the Congress as to why, must justify those actions to the Congress. And then following that notification to Congress, must report every 6 months on their actions. Think about that. So, if you're a sitting president and you want to introduce our military forces somewhere, realistically, as long as you can do it inside 2 days, and you can sufficiently explain yourself to Congress afterward, really, there's no barrier, legally speaking, to the president acting in defense of American interests, as long as he or she can convince Congress and the American people that it was justified. And that's what we saw in the debriefing immediately after the attack was concluded, when the Secretary of Defense got up in front of the press, and I actually watched this debriefing myself on Facebook Live, and informed the American people and the Congress of the findings and why the president took the actions that they took. And that's that. It's consultation. Initial and regular consultations. That is what the War Powers Act calls for. Now, if you want to have a talk about whether or not the War Powers Act itself is in fitting with the Constitution and is constitutional, we can have a long, drawn-out discussion on that. I see the War Powers Act as a divestiture, as a recognition that legislative action does not move fast enough in today's rapidly paced foreign environment. In the military sphere of the world, when actions take place this quickly, the long deliberative process that was laid out in the initial Constitution might have taken too long. So Congress, in the Congress's ability to delegate its own powers out as it sees fit, delegated war powers to the President of the United States, to the executive. Here's where it falls short. In so delegating their power, Congress, as Congress has many times in the past, significantly and substantially weakened the balance of powers created by vesting our powers in the legislative, judicial, and executive. They shifted a little bit of their power over to the executive branch, and in so doing, created this sort of administrative military action that does not necessitate an act of war or a declaration of war. Which is why the United States, while we have fought many wars since 1945, there has not been a declaration of war by the United States since World War II. Because under existing law, it is no longer necessary. So I look back at that and I say, is that in fitting with our founders' vision? Absolutely not. This creates an imperial presidency. But folks, it's an imperial presidency that we've had for 50 years. Okay? This is not new. This is old hat. So, were the president's actions in fitting with the War Powers Act? Yes. Were they in fitting with the Constitution? Yes. Is there somewhere you can point to in the Constitution that says the president can do that? No. But what you can do is you can trace the line back. The power to make war lives in Congress. Congress delegated that to the president via the War Powers Act. As a result, the president has that ability. Was Congress right in delegating that to the president? No. So if you believe in the original intent of the Constitution, the original intent of the Founding Fathers, your problem isn't with President Trump. Your problem is with the War Powers Act. I have a problem with it too. You should have a problem with it. It stacks the deck too far in favor of the executive, and it weakens the legislature. And the legislature is the representative of the people. When you invest the full power of the ability to declare war and declare peace in the executive branch, you have a monarchy on your hands. So don't pick a fight with the Trump administration for making the exact same decision that any other president with this capacity would do. If the War Powers Act didn't exist, we would have had an impassioned plea from the president in front of Congress asking for the authorization to engage Syria. In that time frame, very likely, Damascus would have shifted their operations and hardened their forces to make such an attack less successful. But, I would posit that we could also have a closed-door session of Congress, of both houses meeting, where the president would confer with them and request official authorization from the Congress in order to make these actions, and frankly, I would be happier with that system. I believe that system better befits the Constitution and better exemplifies what the Founding Fathers intended, that there be consultative action between the executive and the legislative branches prior to the application of the mighty force of the American military. So, don't hate the player, hate the game. Take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the news, what's trending. We're also going to take a look at the upcoming election here in Arizona for Congressional District 8 between Republican Debbie Lesko and Democrat hopeful Hiral Tipernini. Coming up on the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
And we're back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Thanks for sticking in for the whole show here. We're bringing it to a close here on April 15th in the year of our Lord 2018. And what is trending on the Twitters? It's crap. It's crap. Trending number 3 on Twitter, unfortunately. It appears that former First Lady Barbara Bush is in failing health and has elected not to seek additional care and will instead focus on comfort care at the age of 92, according to CBS News. Prayers are going out for a great patriot and a great former First Lady Barbara Bush. And that's very, very sad news. Hate to hear things like that. If you haven't read about her, she is really one of our most underappreciated, I think, First Ladies of the United States. But really a fantastic human being. And a great stateswoman. So thoughts and prayers going out to former First Lady Barbara Bush. Looking into the Twitterverse as well, it appears that the Cavs are trending number 1 on Twitter. Everybody is seemingly up in arms about the Cavs game, missing easy shots, and blaming LeBron. Other things I don't care about because I'm not into sports. And of course, trending third from the top here is Queers of Twitter. So that just tells you where the world is today, halfway through April in 2018. Fun times indeed. Taking a look locally here in Arizona, we've had a little bit of chatter back and forth, back toward the primary there, of the upcoming Congressional District 8 race. That's my own congressional district here, between Republican Debbie Lesko and Democratic hopeful Hiral Tipernini. According to azcentral.com, the local Gannett rag, apparently Hiral Tipernini has outraised Debbie Lesko as the race for the vacant seat of former Congressman Trent Franks draws to a close, according to their financial records. Ooh, goodness. However, it appears as of now that Lesko remains 10 points ahead of Tipernini in the polls. So it's cutting it close, folks. If you live here in Arizona in CD8 and you haven't got your ballot in, get your ballot in. I'm not going to, be a cheerleader for Debbie Lesko here. The The candidate I was looking for didn't get in for CD8, but I would really hate to see traditionally conservative seat in Congress go to a really progressive liberal like Tipper Ninny. I'm sure she's a really nice lady, but I just really cannot agree with her talking points at all. Democrats are aiming for an upset in this special election, and it's just getting to the point where even a deep red state like Arizona is at risk, simply because the conservative movement has fractured as it has. Speaking of fracturing, we're going to have a very interesting piece come out on theholonet.com, and I hope you'll give it a read. It appears that a proposal to split California in 3. That's right, 3 states, Northern, Southern, and California proper, has gained enough signatures to appear on the ballot next November. So I'm toying around with a couple of ideas for that article, and I think the one that I'm going to settle on that I like the best is... now, I'm going to give you a hint here. Think Mary Poppins, okay? Silly califractured liberals voting in November. Again, that's silly califractured liberals voting in November. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Anyway. So that's what to look forward to coming up this week on theholonet.com. A lot of things in the fire right now. This election here in Congressional District 8 here in Arizona coming up next weekend. We actually have the Crossroads of the West gun show. That's actually coming to Arizona as well. And I might actually be turning up at that event with some folks from the Constitution Party of Arizona. Make sure you check them out if you're going to be there at the Crossroads of the West gun show here in Arizona. I'm actually pulling that up real quick for you here just to give you information. That's going to be Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Sunday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and that's going to be at 1826 West McDowell Road in Phoenix, Arizona. That is at the Arizona Fairgrounds. So, again, that's going to be the Constitution Party of Arizona. Thank you to Kent from Constitution Party AZ for letting me know about that. They're going to have a booth set up there if you want to learn more about the Constitution Party of Arizona. Check that out at the Crossroads of the West Gun Show, and you might run into me. You might run into your friendly neighborhood HoloNet podcast host, Matt Holloway. I'll make sure I have on my HoloNet swag here to show you. You can order those online. If you want to become a patron of the holonet.com, you can find us on patreon.com/holonet. You can also find us on Maker Support if you feel the urge to be a little bit more conservative and to lend toward the new Millennial Conservative Resistance. Be sure to check that out. You can also find us on YouTube, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, as always at theholonet.com and holonet.lanterns.buzz. Now that I'm done spieling, folks, the world is not ending. At least not today. We're all waiting to see what the inevitable Russian response is going to be, but it appears that the inevitable Russian response has been yet another scowl and threatening words coming from our brothers and sisters over the Urals. Because we do have to remember that humanity is the greatest family that there possibly could be, and at the end of the day, our fellow man is our fellow brother and our fellow sister, no matter how much we disagree with them. Our fellow Americans are our brothers and sisters as well, as much as we disagree internally. And when you see chemical weapons being deployed against innocent children, the only ethical thing to do is to act. I believe it was Bonhoeffer who said, "Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." And as I said, I hold the War Powers Act to be an unconstitutional one, ill-designed, ill-conceived, and ill-enacted by our Congress, giving the executive too much power. But with the power granted him by the Congress and under the Constitution, I feel that President Donald Trump made the correct decision when he decided to open fire with the support of our allies on the chemical weapons manufacturing, distribution, and weaponry sites in Damascus, Syria. Your mileage may vary, but from this constitutional conservative, that's the word. On that note, good night, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. I'm Matt from Phoenix. Thanks.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.